Meditation has so much to give you and add to your life. But what of these benefits is actually provable in science and what just looks like it could be useful? Well, the first thing to note about scientific backing for meditation and the way it can benefit your health is that the body of evidence is really small. Studies about meditation and its benefits to health didn't begin decades ago like so many other aspects of health, such as prescription medications. But in recent years, there have been many studies about meditation practices and breathing practices and the way they can support our health. And that body of research is growing quickly and it's very dynamic and it looks very promising. So what are some general benefits that small body of research that's growing quickly and dynamically, what does it say that it can actually add to our lives? And it seems like this evidence will be solid and will probably continue to be true as we gain more and more evidence and more studies. I would give you 4 things that the scientific backing right now at this moment seems to be very solid. These 4 aspects continue to be corroborated with new studies, and it seems like the more studies we have, the more they'll support exactly that meditation can help you with these 4 things. The first one is lowering stress, and the second one is lowering depression. Now, both of these are massively important in our modern day. One of the reasons is that we're often much too tied to our technology. That technology is constantly driving higher stress. The constant bad news we see is constantly driving higher stress. Our work and play lives don't support rest well, and they're constantly driving us to higher stress. So meditation can help us with this stress level. Also, these same things drive us to depression. And it seems like our modern daily lives are so active and so involved in things that we just don't take care of ourselves very well, and it really drives our mental state towards depression in a destructive way. And the scientific studies that exist right now en masse support the fact that meditation can help you with your stress and depression. If you're really interested in some very recent studies that talk about these, check out this video up here. The third thing that it seems like the modern scientific studies support that meditation can help you with is increasing your focus and agency. It makes total sense. If you've done some mindfulness-based meditation, then you've spent time paying attention to your mind, and one of the things you get better at is focusing on things. Well, that just makes sense. It's like when you practice putting your focus in a specific place and holding that focus, you get better at holding your focus on things. But if you think about what that means for your general life, it increases your agency in so many ways. Simply being able to have the agency to put your focus where you want it means you're more able to do the things you want to do. And the scientific studies are showing a larger and larger backing, saying that we can use meditation in order to increase our focus and as a result, our agency in our lives. The last aspect, which is really interesting, is a direct physical change in the brain. One of the things that the modern scientific studies seem to support well, and again, this is a small but growing rapidly body of evidence, they seem to support that meditation practices on a daily basis decrease degradation of the insula in the brain. Now, I'm certainly not a brain researcher or a psychotherapist, and I won't try to get into the nitty-gritty of what this means. What it seems to speak to me is that meditation practices help increase the longevity of our brain. Personally, and I don't mean to get morbid, but I'm not that afraid of death. I've lived a wonderful life and I don't look forward to death, but it's fine. One thing I find terrifying though is mental degradation. Things like Alzheimer's and dementia are terrifying, truly. So I would like to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can in my life to make sure I push those things into the future and that I don't have to deal with them. Like, as much as I can possibly put those off, I would like to put them off. And what this body of research seems to say is that with a daily meditative practice, I can support my brain in helping it degrade slower, specifically in the insula of the brain. And if that's the case, I'm super in. Now, these really are the 4 things that I can see the modern scientific studies directly say meditation will help you with these. But I think there are a lot more kind of esoteric aspects that meditation has certainly changed my life in reference to, and I'd just like to share them with you. So I would call this more of a case study for myself, or really case studies for the many meditators that I know, as they all experience these same things. Now, in these case studies, what I really want to talk about is the concept of self. Self is very interesting and very difficult to even process and think about. One of the reasons is that self is so malleable. We change our self many times throughout the day. I wake up in the morning and I'm with my wife here at home, and I have one set of self that I enact in that. And then we leave and we go to work, and as soon as I walk in the doors to work and I'm working with students and I'm working with my bosses, the leaders at the school, I have a very different self that I present to those people. And then I leave there and maybe I go to the shop on my way home. Well, when I go into the shop, I have a very different self that I present to anyone I interact with in that shop. And then maybe in the shop, I meet a parent of one of my students. Well, I have a different self I represent to that person. All of this is just to say that self is a very complex topic. And as a result, I think meditation is so useful. It certainly has helped me figure out who my self is, what are the things that are important to me, and the person I want to present in all of these different aspects of my life. You're probably familiar with the way that people used to think about ourselves as being a combination of mind, body, and soul. And that's a really interesting way to think about it. I always was kind of confused when I was younger about the fact that body and mind make perfect sense, and they are separate entities. I feel like they're different. I can tell simply by my experience in life. But then we add soul to the mix, and it's such an interesting thing. As a Christian, I might call it spirit, and I would say the Holy Spirit is totally different than my mind and my mental processes. And so having a self that's my mental self and then a self that's my spirit self makes perfect sense to me as a Christian. But if I were an atheist, I think I would be very confused about this. Maybe I would even think like the soul or the spirit self doesn't exist. But then maybe as an atheist, you're simply denying the fact that you have a spirit self and killing off that piece of yourself. Well, that's horrible. So I think this is worth processing, and meditation will help you in processing. Maybe a more interesting or useful way to think about a similar idea to the mind-body-soul thing is the way Eckhart Tolle talks about the speaker and the listener. And it's like in our mind, there are these two separate roles going on all the time. And if I don't give attention to my mind, it goes on speaking, and it just goes on its own, and it does things, and it solves problems. And that's wonderful. It's very, very useful to us. But also we can take on the role of the listener, and we can watch that script. And that's the idea of mindfulness meditation. It's simply placing your attention on the things going on in your mind, and so you are mindful. But I mean to talk about it in terms of the sense of self. Well, if you're kind of confused about the idea of like mind, body, and soul, then it might be useful to say, well, there are multiple selves going on in your mental space. And those selves are like the unconscious mind that goes on and thinks and does things. And then the role we can take watching over that mind, the listener that stands behind, the way Eckhart Tolle talks about it, it really means there are multiple selves in your mental space. And meditation practices can help us sort this out and figure out who are these selves and how can we change them. Another common thought about this comes from Sam Harris and his work. I feel like I have very similar experiences, but I describe them very differently because the way he describes them is not the way they feel to me. Sam Harris talks about the dissolvement of self and the realization that myself doesn't exist. And there are many other deep thinkers that agree with this type of idea. Famously, Schrödinger, the scientist, believed in one universal consciousness. So he didn't believe that I have my own individual self and consciousness, but I'm simply a piece of the universal consciousness. It seems to me to be very similar to Sam Harris's idea of the dissolvement of self. I would just say that I understand what he says and I get it, and I understand the idea of universal consciousness, but it's not quite the way that it feels to me when I get into those deep meditative practices. So I would speak about it differently. Well, as meditative practices help us get to know this self and figure out what are our values and how do we want to interact with the world and put our agency and our values out into the world, really one of the most important things is it helps us make sure that the ladder we're climbing is up against the right wall. It's a common experience that people that reach the top of the ladder realized they were climbing the wrong wall. I believe Michael Jordan said after winning his third NBA championship, well, I wish everyone could win an NBA championship so they can understand that it's not the answer. And this is a common experience. Many people achieve these massive goals of being one of the best in the world at their industry, and then they realize that while that obsession served them and helped them become this person they were aiming to become, it really wasn't the answer to like the hole in their lives they're trying to fill in. Their ladder was against the wrong wall. Well, these meditative practices can help us make sure that we're climbing the right ladder and the things that we're achieving in our daily life are serving us as people. As a result of this type of work, I honestly believe that meditation has helped me find more meaning in my life. There's a reason that people call these spiritual practices. And for me, it's like you don't have to believe in any specific religion in order to do meditative practices, but they really do help you develop meaning in life because they help you develop who are you and how do you interact with the world in order to enact your values. So I started with the idea of what benefit can meditation add to your life? Well, some of these things are science-backed and some are not. But honestly, I truly believe it will help you find more meaning in life. The last thing I would say is there are many, many different types of meditative practices. And all of these different types of meditative practices yield different results. If this is interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. And if you're interested in these different types of emphases and what you can get from your meditation practice, I got a video coming up on the end screen. This is the Stoic Yogi, out.